Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment everything started falling apart. Maybe it was one of those things that creep up on you slowly, like the tide rising until you're knee-deep and didn't even notice. Or maybe it was there all along, staring me in the face, but I was too damn blind to see it. Either way, when the storm finally hit, it left me standing in the wreckage, wondering how the hell I'd missed the signs. My name's Paul, and for most of my life, I thought I had things pretty figured out. I worked my ass off as a long-haul truck driver, clocking endless hours on the road so my family could have a comfortable life. My wife, Lisa, was the love of my life. At least that's what I thought back then. She was funny, beautiful, and had this way of lighting up a room with her smile. Our son, Jack, was 16, full of that teenage energy that swung between enthusiasm and surly attitude faster than you could blink. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every few weeks, I'd come home from a stretch on the road, drop my fee check on the counter, and spend a few days catching up with my family. Those days at home were what kept me going. Seeing Lisa's face light up when I walked through the door, hearing Jack's sarcastic jokes about how he'd survived another week of school without me, it made the long hours and the endless miles worth it. But over time, something changed. It was subtle at first, little things I brushed off as stress or mood swings. Lisa stopped meeting me at the door with her usual enthusiasm, her smile a little more forced. Jack, who used to follow me around the house talking about his friends and basketball practice, started spending more time in his room, barely looking up from his phone. "Everything okay?" I'd ask Lisa when I noticed her staring off into space, her brow furrowed. "Yeah, just tired," she'd say, brushing it off like it was nothing. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? It wasn't until one weekend in early spring that I started to feel like something was really off. I'd been home for a few days, enjoying the rare chance to sleep in my own bed, when I noticed Lisa spending more time on her phone. She'd laugh at something on the screen, then quickly put it down when I walked into the room. "Who are you texting?" I asked one evening as we sat on the couch. "Just Tina," she said, naming one of her friends from work. "She's having guy troubles again." I nodded, not thinking much of it. Tina was always having guy troubles. But then there was Jack. He'd been quieter than usual lately, his sarcastic edge dulled by something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "You doing okay, kid?" I asked one night when I found him sitting in the kitchen, poking at a bowl of cereal long after dinner. "Yeah, fine," he muttered without looking up. "You sure? You've been pretty quiet lately." I said I'm fine, he snapped, shoving the bowl away and storming off to his room. I stood there, stunned. Jack and I had butted heads before. What dad and teenage son have it? But this felt different. It felt personal. The night before I left for my next run, I tried to talk to Lisa about it. "Jack's been acting weird," I said as we lay in bed. "You notice anything?" She hesitated, her back turned to me. "He's a teenager, Paul. They're moody. It's normal." "Yeah, but he's never been like this before. You think something's going on." She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "Paul, you worry too much. Everything's fine." Her words should have been comforting, but they weren't. There was something in her tone, something guarded, that set off a quiet alarm in the back of my mind. When I left for my next run, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to push it aside, focusing on the road ahead and the promise of a big paycheck at the end of the week. But even as I drove mile after mile, that nagging doubt lingered, growing louder with each passing day. Little did I know my life was about to change forever. The morning it all fell apart started like any other. I'd been on the road for 2 weeks, hauling a load of industrial equipment down to Texas. The run had been long and grueling, but the pay was good, and I'd been counting the days until I could get home to Lisa and Jack. The plan was simple: finish the drop-off, grab a meal at a truck stop, and head back north. But life has a funny way of wrecking plans when you least expect it. I was sitting in the cab of my rig, sipping on a bad cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. "We need to talk when you get home." I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. Those 4 words never meant anything good. I typed out a quick reply. "Everything okay?" But she didn't respond. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I finished the drop-off and started the long drive back, but my mind was miles away. What could Lisa want to talk about? Was she upset about something? Was Jack in trouble? By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, and there was no sign of Lisa or Jack. I grabbed my duffel bag and headed inside, expecting to find them asleep. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Paul, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. Jack and I are gone. Don't try to contact us." The words blurred as I read them over and over, my heart pounding in my chest. Gone? What the hell did she mean gone? I checked Jack's room first. Empty. The bed was neatly made, the shelves cleared of his trophies and books. Lisa's room, our room, was the same. The closet was half empty, her clothes and shoes missing. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. I tried calling Lisa, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried Jack's phone next, but it was the same story. Panic set in, a cold, gnawing dread that wrapped itself around my chest and wouldn't let go. For hours, I paced the house, trying to make sense of it all. Why would Lisa leave? Why would she take Jack with her? We weren't perfect, but we were solid, or so I'd thought. As the sun came up, I finally sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the note like it might give me answers if I looked hard enough. That's when I noticed the envelope. It was sitting just under the note, my name written on the front in Lisa's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Paul, I know this isn't what you expected, but it's what's best for all of us. I've met someone else, and we've been seeing each other for a while. Jack knows, and he agrees this is the right thing to do. We're starting over, just the three of us. Please don't try to contact us. It's better this way. Lisa. I sat there, stunned. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the letter. Lisa had met someone else? She'd been planning this for a while? And Jack, my son, had been in on it? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. The next few days were a blur. I called everyone I could think of, Lisa's friends, her family, even Jack's friends, but no one knew anything. Or if they did, they weren't telling me. I filed a missing persons report, but the officer at the station barely looked up from his computer as I explained the situation. Sir, if your wife left you willingly, there's nothing we can do, he said. She's an adult, and she has the right to make her own choices. She took my son, I snapped. How old is he? 16. The officer shrugged. That's old enough to decide who he wants to live with. Sorry, but there's nothing illegal about what she's done. It felt like a punch to the gut. I threw myself into work after that, taking every run I could just to keep my mind off things. But no matter how many miles I drove, the pain followed me. Every time I stopped at a rest area or checked into a motel, I found myself staring at my phone, hoping for some kind of message, an apology, an explanation, something. Weeks passed, then months. I tried reaching out to Jack once, sending him a text. I don't know why you're doing this, but I love you. Please call me. He didn't reply. It wasn't until almost a year later that I finally heard from him. I was on the road, parked at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere, when my phone buzzed with a text. Hey, Dad. It's Jack. I want to talk. My heart leapt. I called him immediately, barely waiting for the phone to ring before he picked up. Jack. Yeah, it's me, he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered, more serious. What's going on? Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine, he said. I need to tell you something. Okay, I said, my heart pounding. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For leaving. For not talking to you. I didn't know what to do. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Why, Jack? Why did you go along with it? He hesitated. Mom said it was the only way. She said you'd be better off without us. Better off? I repeated, my voice cracking. Jack, I've been miserable without you. You're my son. How could you think I'd be better off without you? I don't know, he said quietly. I believed her. That conversation stayed with me long after it ended. It wasn't the reunion I'd hoped for, but it was something. A crack in the wall Lisa had built between us. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The conversation with Jack haunted me for days. I kept replaying his words in my head, trying to make sense of them. Lisa had told him I'd be better off without them. What kind of twisted logic was that? And why had he believed her? For the first time in months, I felt like I had a chance to get some answers, to unravel the mess Lisa had made of our lives. I just didn't know where to start. Jack texted me again a week later. Can we meet? Just us? I didn't hesitate. Name the time and place, I replied. We ended up meeting at a diner just outside town. It was one of those places where the coffee is bad, but the pancakes make up for it. When I walked in, Jack was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. He looked older somehow, his shoulders hunched like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Hey, kid, I said as I slid into the seat across from him. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice quiet. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress came by to take our orders, and I barely glanced at the menu before asking for coffee. Jack ordered a Coke, stirring the straw around the glass without drinking it. I'm glad you called, I said finally. Yeah, he said, staring down at the table. I needed to. What's going on, Jack? Why now? He hesitated, his fingers tracing patterns on the table. I don't know how to say this. Just say it, I said gently. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. Mom lied to me. Those 3 words hit me like a freight train. What do you mean? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She said you didn't love us anymore, Jack said, his voice trembling. She told me you were going to leave, that you didn't care about us. She said you had someone else? My jaw tightened. That's not true, Jack. None of it. You know that, right? He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I didn't at first. I believed her. She was so convincing, Dad. She made it sound like you were the one abandoning us, not the other way around. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my anger in check. Why would she do that? Jack hesitated. Because of him, her boyfriend, the guy she left with. She wanted to start a new life with him. And I guess she thought it'd be easier if I hated you. The room seemed to tilt for a moment, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Lisa had lied to Jack, manipulated him. Also, she could run off with some other guy. Jack, I'm so sorry, I said, my voice thick. I'm sorry she put you in the middle of this. It's not your fault, he said quickly. I feel so stupid. I should have known she was lying. No, I said firmly. You were just a kid. She's the one who screwed up, not you. We talked for hours that night. Jack told me everything he could remember. How Lisa had started acting strange months before she left. How she'd introduced him to her boyfriend under the guise of a friend. How she'd fed him lie after lie until he didn't know what to believe. By the time we left the diner, I felt like I'd been gutted. But for the first time, I also felt like I had a path forward. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I need to talk to someone about custody, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, listened patiently as I explained the situation. Do you have any proof that your wife manipulated your son? She asked. Just his word, I said. But he's willing to talk. He knows what she did. Karen nodded. That's a start. It's not going to be easy. But if your son's willing to testify, we might have a case. A case. Just hearing those words gave me hope. Over the next few weeks, Jack and I started rebuilding our relationship. He came over to my place for dinner, and we fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, talking about school, joking about my terrible cooking, and even shooting hoops in the driveway like we used to. But the shadow of Lisa's lies loomed over everything. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Jack turned to me and said, Do you think Mom will ever admit what she did? I sighed. I don't know, kid. I hope so. But even if she doesn't, you and I know the truth. That's what matters. A month later, I got a call from Lisa. I heard you've been talking to Jack, she said, her tone clipped. That's right, I said. He's my son, Lisa. Did you really think you could keep him away from me forever? You don't understand, she said. I did what I had to do. What you had to do? I snapped. You lied to him, Lisa. You turned him against me. And for what? So you could run off with your boyfriend? She didn't respond. Jack deserves better than that, I said. He deserves the truth. The conversation ended with no resolution, but I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for Lisa. I was doing it for Jack. And I wasn't giving up. After that phone call with Lisa, I knew things were going to get messy. She didn't outright threaten me, but I could hear it in her voice, the defensiveness, the anger. She wasn't going to let me reconnect with Jack without a fight. But I wasn't backing down. Karen, my lawyer, got the ball rolling on the custody case. It wasn't going to be a full-blown custody battle since Jack was already 16, but we were filing for a modification that would allow me to have regular visitation. It's not going to be easy, Karen warned me during one of our meetings. Family courts tend to favor the custodial parent, especially when there's no documented history of abuse or neglect. Lisa lied to my son, I said firmly. She manipulated him to make me look like the bad guy. Isn't that enough? It might be, Karen said, but we'll need to prove it. Is Jack willing to testify? I hesitated. I think so. He's been opening up more, and he knows what Lisa did was wrong. But I don't want to put him in the middle of this again. Karen nodded, her expression serious. Unfortunately, he's already in the middle. The best thing you can do is show him that you're fighting for him, not against him. Jack and I talked about the case a few days later. Are you sure about this, Dad? He asked, his brow furrowed as we sat at the kitchen table. I'm sure, I said, but I won't push you into anything. If you don't want to testify, we'll find another way. He was quiet for a moment, staring down at the table. I'll do it, he said finally. I want people to know the truth. His words hit me harder than I expected. After everything Lisa had done, Jack was still willing to stand up for me. It made me realize just how strong he was and how much I owed it to him to see this through. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Karen and her team gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and worked with Jack to prepare his statement. I felt like I was living in a constant state of tension, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And drop it did. One evening, as I was wrapping up a long shift, I got a call from Lisa. "You're going to regret this, Paul," she said, her voice cold. "Regret what?" I asked, though I already knew. "This little stunt with the courts," she snapped. "You're dragging Jack into something he doesn't need to be a part of." "Don't you dare put this on me," I said. "You're the one who lied to him, Lisa. You're the one who dragged him into this." She laughed bitterly. "Keep telling yourself that. But when this all blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." She hung up before I could respond. The day of the hearing arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Jack sat beside me in the courtroom, his shoulders tense, but his expression calm. Lisa was across the room, her face a mask of indifference. Her boyfriend wasn't there, but I knew he was lurking in the background, probably feeding her all the confidence she needed. When it was Jack's turn to testify, I held my breath. He spoke clearly and confidently, detailing how Lisa had lied to him about me and manipulated him into leaving. He didn't hold back, and I could see the judge taking notes as he spoke. Lisa's lawyer tried to poke holes in his testimony, questioning his memory and suggesting that he might be exaggerating. But Jack didn't waver. When he stepped down from the stand, I felt a surge of pride. No matter what happened, I knew he'd done everything he could. The judge's decision came a week later. I was granted partial visitation rights, with Jack allowed to decide how often he wanted to see me. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it was a step in the right direction. When I told Jack the news, he grinned for the first time in what felt like forever. "That's great, Dad," he said. "Yeah," I said, ruffling his hair. "It is." But the fight wasn't over. Lisa was furious about the decision, and she made it clear she wasn't going to make things easy for us. "You think you've won?" she said during one of our exchanges. "This isn't over, Paul." I didn't respond. Let her play her games. As long as I had Jack in my life, nothing else mattered. Jack started spending more time at my place after that. At first, it was just a few weekends here and there, but eventually it became a regular thing. We fell into a routine, watching movies, shooting hoops, and even tackling a few home improvement projects together. For the first time in years, it felt like we were a real father and son again. But Lisa's shadow loomed over us. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, Jack turned to me and said, "Do you think Mom will ever apologize?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "She's stubborn. She's not going to admit she was wrong unless she has no other choice." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I don't hate her, you know. I'm mad at her, but she's still my mom." "I get it," I said, "and you don't have to choose between us. You can love us both, even if we don't get along." He gave me a small smile. "Thanks, Dad." For a while, things started to settle down. Jack was spending more time at my place, and we were rebuilding the bond that Lisa's lies had nearly destroyed. He still lived with her most of the time. It was what the court arrangement allowed, but every weekend he'd show up at my door, backpack slung over one shoulder, ready for a couple of days of normalcy. Lisa, meanwhile, had gone quiet. Too quiet. At first, I chalked it up to her being bitter about losing control. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to wonder if maybe she'd finally accepted the new reality. Maybe she realized that her manipulations weren't going to work anymore, that Jack was old enough to make his own decisions, and I wasn't going to back down. I should have known better. One Friday evening, Jack showed up looking upset. He dropped his backpack in the hallway and flopped onto the couch without a word. "What's going on, kid?" I asked, sitting down beside him. "Mom's boyfriend," he said, staring at the floor. I don't know. He's been acting weird." "Weird how?" Jack hesitated, chewing on his bottom lip. "He keeps trying to buddy up to me, like buy me stuff and asking me all these questions about you. It's creepy." My stomach turned. "What kind of questions?" "Like if you've ever talked bad about Mom, or if you got a girlfriend, or whatever." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "Jack, if he's making you uncomfortable, you need to tell your mom." Jack laughed bitterly. "Yeah, right? Like she believed me." "You don't know that," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. "She's been acting weird too," Jack said. "Like she's trying to convince me to stop coming here. She says it's better for me to focus on school and not split my time between two places." My jaw tightened. I could see what was happening. Lisa and her boyfriend were trying to pull Jack away from me again. Only this time, they were being more subtle about it. "She can't stop you from coming here," I said firmly. "You have the right to see me, and I'm not letting her take that away from you again." Jack nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The next time Jack went back to Lisa's, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen. I tried to keep myself busy, fixing things around the house, taking extra shifts at work, but the anxiety was always there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. My instincts were right. One evening, about a month later, I got a call from Jack. He sounded frantic, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Dad, I need you to come get me. Now." "What's going on?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "Just hurry." I didn't waste any time. I drove to Lisa's house as fast as I could, my heart pounding the whole way. When I pulled up, Jack was standing on the sidewalk, his face pale and his backpack clutched tightly in one hand. "Jack!" I called, stepping out of the car. He ran to me, his eyes wide with fear. "Let's go," he said, climbing into the passenger seat. "What happened?" I asked as I pulled away. "Mom's boyfriend," he said, his voice shaking. He got in my face, yelling about how I need to stop disrespecting her. I told him to back off, and he grabbed my arm. I slammed on the brakes, my blood boiling. "He what?" Jack nodded, his hands trembling. He let go when Mom walked in, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there like it wasn't a big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. "You're staying with me tonight," I said. "We'll figure this out in the morning." That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about what Jack had told me. Lisa's boyfriend had crossed the line, and Lisa had let him. The next morning, I called Karen. "This changes everything," she said after I explained the situation. "If Jack's in danger, we need to act fast." "What can we do?" I asked. "We'll file for an emergency modification," Karen said. "It's not a guarantee, but if we can prove that Jack's safety is at risk, the court may grant you full custody." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal filings and court appearances. Jack was willing to testify, but the thought of putting him on the stand made me sick. Still, we didn't have much choice. Lisa, of course, denied everything. She claimed Jack was exaggerating, that her boyfriend was just trying to set boundaries, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. But Jack didn't waver. When it was his turn to speak, he told the judge exactly what had happened, his voice steady and unwavering. I couldn't have been prouder. The judge's decision came 2 weeks later. I was granted full custody, effective immediately. Lisa was allowed supervised visitation, but her boyfriend was banned from having any contact with Jack. When I told Jack the news, he let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it in for weeks. "Thanks, Dad," he said, giving me a small smile. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I'm just glad you're safe." But even with the court's decision, I knew this wasn't the end. Lisa wasn't the type to let things go, and I could feel her anger simmering just beneath the surface. For now, though, I had Jack, and that was all that mattered. Winning full custody of Jack felt like a victory, but it came with a bittersweet edge. I knew Lisa wasn't going to disappear quietly, and part of me was bracing for her next move. Still, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe a little easier. Jack was safe, and that was all I'd ever wanted. The first few weeks after the court's decision were an adjustment. Jack moved in full-time, and we settled into a new routine: school, basketball practice, and evenings spent binging TV shows or working on his college applications. I could see the change in him almost immediately. He was more relaxed, his humor starting to come back in bits and pieces. But Lisa's shadow still lingered. She was granted supervised visitation once a month, and while I didn't love the idea of Jack seeing her after everything that had happened, I knew it was important for him to have some kind of relationship with his mom. The first visit took place at a neutral location, a social services center downtown. Jack was quiet when I dropped him off, his shoulders tense as he walked into the building. I waited in the car, trying not to let my imagination get the best of me. When he came back out an hour later, he looked tired but calm. "How'd it go?" I asked as he climbed into the car. "She was okay," he said after a pause. "She apologized for everything, but it didn't feel real, you know? Like she was just saying it because she had to." I nodded. "What about him? Did she mention her boyfriend?" Jack shook his head. "She said they broke up, but I don't know if I believe her." Over time, the visits became less frequent. Jack never said it outright, but I could tell he didn't want to see her as much anymore. He'd been hurt too many times, and while he still loved her in his own way, the trust had been shattered. Meanwhile, life at home was finally starting to feel normal again. Jack was thriving at school, making new friends, and even talking about trying out for the basketball team. I was working less, making sure I was home for dinner every night, and trying to make up for lost time. For a while, it felt like we'd finally found our rhythm. Then came a message. It was a Sunday morning, and Jack and I were sitting on the porch drinking coffee. Well, I was drinking coffee. He was sipping some overly sweet ice thing he'd picked up from the drive-thru. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Lisa. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at the message, my stomach tightening. Lisa hadn't contacted me directly in months, and the fact that she was reaching out now felt like a red flag. "What's up?" Jack asked, noticing the look on my face. "It's your mom," I said. He frowned. "What does she want?" "She wants to talk," I said, still staring at the screen. "I don't know why. Are you going to call her?" I hesitated. "Do you think I should?" Jack shrugged. "That's up to you. Just don't let her drag you back into her mess." I waited until Jack was out with his friends later that day before calling Lisa. She picked up on the first ring. "Paul," she said, her voice rushed. "Thanks for calling. What's going on, Lisa?" I asked, keeping my tone even. There was a pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For lying to Jack. For hurting you. I know I messed up, and I hate that I've lost him because of it. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take her words at face value. But another part of me, the part that remembered all the pain she'd caused, couldn't help but question her motives. "What do you want, Lisa?" I asked finally. I want another chance," she said, her voice trembling. "To see Jack more. To fix things with him. Please, Paul. I'm begging you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I knew how much she'd hurt Jack, but I also knew how much he'd struggled with losing her. He still loved her, no matter what she'd done. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It's not up to me. Jack's old enough to make his own decisions, and I'm not going to force him to do anything he doesn't want to do." "I get that," she said. "But can you at least talk to him? Tell him I'm trying? I just want a chance to make things right." When Jack got home that evening, I told him about the call. "She wants another chance," I said, watching his face carefully. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Dad. I mean, I miss her, but how do I know she's not just going to screw me over again?" "You don't," I said. "But maybe this is her way of trying to make amends." "It's your call, Jack. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll think about it." A week later, Jack decided to meet with Lisa. They talked for hours, and when he came home, he seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "She's different," he said as we sat on the couch that evening. "I don't know if I trust her yet, but I think she's trying." "That's all you can ask for," I said. Life didn't go back to the way it was before. Too much had happened, and some wounds don't heal completely. But Jack and I had built something strong out of the wreckage, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were going to be okay. As for Lisa, only time would tell if her apologies were genuine. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let her or anyone else tear my family apart again.